Welcome back to the Describe Your World podcast. This is episode 8, and I am Travis. And today I'm with my guest Tyler. How's it going, man?
I'm doing all right. What about yourself?
Not bad. I'm excited for this episode, excited to learn about you and your story and everything that makes you unique. Just to go over a couple things on the administrative side, if you're listening on audio format on Spotify, Amazon, Google, Apple, or if you're watching on YouTube, do appreciate a subscription on YouTube or a follow on any of those formats. It really does help a lot. Also, if you're on Apple or any platform where you can download the podcast, that's also really helpful. Any kind of reviews or comments are also appreciated. So we'll just go right into what we normally go into on the podcast, which is talking about early life. So I'll let Tyler kind of take over and introduce himself however he'd like, and then we'll talk a little bit about kind of where you come from and what makes you who you are.
Yeah, so like Travis said, my name's Tyler, and I've been working with Travis for close to a year now, which is kind of crazy. And yeah, I guess I'll just get right into like the early life. I was born in Rock Hill, South Carolina, and that's where I still am. But I work out of the Charlotte location, or I work out of Charlotte offices and whatnot. Yeah, in terms of early life, I mean, there isn't much to say. Very, very lucky, I guess, to go to the schools that I did, the school districts that I attended. So yeah, I'm pretty thankful in that regard.
Cool. So you said Rock Hill, South Carolina. So what's it like being a little kid in Rock Hill? Are you doing a lot of activities? Was it more of like a routine?
Um, yeah, that's a good question. So, as a kid, there's Rock Hill, is part of York County. So it was kind of an in between of like going out to the more countryside of things and then coming to Rock Hill, which is of course closer to the city. So, I did go to school in like York school districts. So that was kind of unique. In a sense of it was a crowd that was just not ideal per se. Just big trucks jamming out, stuff like that is like kind of what York is known for, unfortunately. But yeah, in terms of activities I did growing up, uh, more on the later side of things, I started skating like in high school. So yeah, we used to go skate at anywhere I really could, downtown areas and whatnot. Everything I did as a kid, in terms of activities, weren't stuck with. It was mostly kid sports and whatnot. So yeah, in that regard, there wasn't a whole lot of interesting things when I was younger.
Skating is interesting. I tried skating for a short time and realized how uncoordinated I am. So that was a very brief hobby. I had a skateboard, but when you live down a dirt road from the highway, skating is fairly limited. I mean, you're gonna fall a lot and not have too many like sweet jumps.
Yeah, definitely. If I lived 30 minutes south of here, skateboarding would have probably been almost impossible. But given how Rock Hill is, relatively populated, relatively big city, there was a good amount of places to go and do those things with friends.
So are you like super social? Did you have a lot of friends as a kid? More of a loner? What was your social life like?
Um, Definitely more of a loner. The friends kind of, they shift grade to grade up until like high school when you find that initial set of friends, I guess. But yeah, I mean, growing up, I was always really nervous kid. So like I was never super outgoing in that sense. But, once I got to the latter half of middle school and got into high school, I met more people like me with very similar interests. And that's where you kind of find, because I feel like kindergarten through eighth grade, your friends are whoever's in the class, and that's it. At least it was for me. And
Hmm.
once I got into high school, it was kind of like it didn't matter what classes, my friends stayed consistent throughout.
Oh, okay. That makes a
Yeah.
little bit more sense. So you had like a bigger environment in high school, lots more people to choose from.
Yes, exactly.
So as a kid, I know as a kid I was also a loner. I spent a lot of time either reading or playing video games or watching anime, TV shows, whatever I could do, like just in the comfort of my bedroom, just because I was not extremely active. We did some things in school, but I was only in school with other people until sixth grade. And then the
Hmm.
school I was going to shut down. So I was homeschooled from that point. So it kind of shifted a lot as far as socially. So what were some of those loner type things you were doing? What were you into?
Um, let's see. So I used to be like kind of in the beginning of high school. I was kind of into the engineering side of things. I had, you know, robots and stuff like that, robot kits that I would build, and I wouldn't program them. I would just download it from online, but I would build them. And yeah, that was kind of something that just first popped into mind when you say loner because it's robots. But yeah, other than that, once it got um, to high school, definitely, I was really into, gaming, and that was consistent. Unfortunately, it was just nothing but gaming, and you know, I watched my share of anime in high school and whatnot, but I really started broadening my horizons once I kind of graduated. I realized that reading is actually nice. It's not just something that's for school. So so I picked up more hobbies once I got out of school, and yeah, that definitely broadened my horizons. Because prior it was probably just got home from school, game, go to sleep, wake up, go to school, game.
Do you have any siblings or are you only child?
All my siblings are half siblings.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, so I primarily lived with my sister, and it was just me and my sister. And while my other half siblings were at my father's house, and my it it was funny at times because she doesn't have the same interests, obviously. So there came a certain point where we didn't share any of the same interests. And yeah, then going over to my dad's house or whatever, I have my little brother who's he just turned 13, so it's obviously easier to share interest with someone that's actually interested in them.
Hmm. That's
Yeah.
interesting. So with your
Yeah.
sister, what's the age difference there with your sister?
It was the same actually. So she's my half sister and she's also 13. And and yeah, once it got to a certain point, we just stopped relating to each other because
Hmm.
we were into different things.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a half sister and we have like a 16, 17-year age gap. So I've only seen my half sister like twice. So
Yeah.
it's not only that we couldn't relate, it's that I don't really know her.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
no, it sounds challenging because it's your sibling, but at the same time, I imagine they're still world apart. Like you have your own world that you're kind of thriving in.
Exactly.
So even though you share the same space and the same environment, it doesn't really mean that you're similar people.
Hmm. Definitely.
Are there noticeable differences between like you and your parents, or do you like favor more on one side than the other?
Um, kind of. It's kind of neither. I mean, I don't mean to, not in a crude way, not in a crude way, but
Right.
like in terms of uh, let's say my hobbies and relatability, um, they're kind of vastly different, and they don't really share any of the same interests. Uh, But yeah, in terms of favoring, no, there's no one single one I prefer because, each one has pros and cons. Um, but yeah, I mean, I definitely can say that in terms of relatability, you always have that cool uncle that's into the exact same video games that you are, and exact same, like my uncle has been playing Pokemon since Pokemon Red and Blue. So yeah, we like there's still relatives that share that interest.
Hmm.
with
Yeah,
me.
I think unfortunately, even though I have a family of like 100 people, I don't have anyone who shares the same interest. It's like um, I have
Yeah.
I have like 8 aunts and uncles, and they all have their own offspring. So I have like 100 cousins, and my all of my cousins are vastly different. They're all
Hmm.
into like sports, and they're all into big social gatherings and spending time with each other and kind of staying in the same area. And I was the strange one that branched off and left and went 2 hours away. And I don't
Yeah.
care that much about sports or seeing them or hanging out with them, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely say as my brother, got older, he became less naive and, he's not gonna act like he's interested anymore. And yeah, now he's really big into sports and plays sports in middle school, whereas I'm quite the opposite.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Why don't we go into, so we're still kind of on the same vein of education, but I know one thing you mentioned talking about earlier was kind of going over your transition from high school into like college and then figuring out your path as far as career and developing
Mhm.
yourself and things like that. So interested in what you want to share regarding that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, coming from the standpoint of someone who's, not in grade school, but it's coming to an end soon, within the next few years, uh, you know, thinking about my future, back then, it is so askewed than compared to what I thought it was going to be,
Mm,
and, like, there's just, once it gets to that last year, there's just tons of, tough decisions. Like, whenever I was initially in high school, I had plans to join the military, and yeah, I mean, I had enlisted. I had went to boot camp, um,
okay.
and yeah, and essentially, due to COVID, it was right at the beginning of COVID. Due to COVID and due to the side effects that it causes, uh, that was no longer a viable option for me anymore. Therefore, I'm back home and I'm thinking, well, what's next? Like that was my plan A, and I feel like that's one of the most important things is like I was so set on that plan A and for, plans to come out from under you like a rug. And yeah, so I come home and initially think, well, I don't want to be a Joe Schmo that, just works at, um, any convenience store or retail store. So I knew I wanted to, still make something of myself. I wasn't going to let this brief kind of setback do anything to me. And yeah, so I started researching into what would be, good careers for me to join, or for me to pursue. And I had it eventually found that a cybersecurity program was about to start at a college near me. And, computers is always something I had thought about. In high school, I took a few engineering courses. I was part of robotics. And then I had taken a few computer courses. But then obviously, I had set myself up for that plan A. So therefore, I stopped pursuing it.
Okay.
And I don't kick myself in the butt for it, but I want to.
Mm,
And um, so basing how my experience in those classes and just looking at some of the material, it seemed like you know an interest for me, opposed to retail. And yeah, so I had started that program. I got a job to work while during the program. Therefore, I can save up money and not just do classes or whatnot. So I got out of that that 6 month boot camp, and I thought that it was all going to go easy, kind of. Now that I got out, I had scheduled. I they give you a Security Plus voucher essentially when you finish that program, and I had scheduled it. I had studied, my ass off for the exam, and then I had went and taken the exam in September and not passed.
Mhm.
And to see that, to feel so defeated after everything that had happened in the past year and a half was just a really big setback mentally, to essentially work all those 6 months. And I knew it was worth it for that course and whatnot. But it still just sucked that I wasn't able to pass and get the certification at the time. Therefore, after that, I just started self-studying. Unfortunately, I didn't just go back the next week and do it. And, I want to kick myself in the butt for that as well. But I mean, at the same time, what really was overloading myself with all this stress and pressure towards the end of that course, because I was balancing the coursework and studying for the Security Plus and also maintaining the job at a retail store. So yeah, I mean, it was definitely a lot, but a few days later, I got back to studied some different material, took a break from security, not necessarily a long one, but just the material for that exam. So yeah, then I just built up skills, started applying to places, and it took a while. I mean, it took a few months after my program to actually find a position, and that was pretty defeating as well, to apply to these 100, upwards of 100 job openings and not really hear anything back. Like, I'd say this time about a year ago, like, I was ready to give up looking for jobs in IT, because I was like telling myself, I was just like, dude, I'm too young. I don't know what it is. Like, they're not taking me. But luckily I found a job at the company I currently work for. Are we allowed to say stuff
Sure,
like
we
that?
will. I mean, if we get to a point with the podcast, so for future listeners, if we get to a point where there's like 100,000 subscribers, we'll stop doing things like this. But for the time being, I think it's relatively safe to say that we work for a right-of-way and utility company,
Mhm.
national company, lots of locations. But interestingly enough, the thing that most of our workers and users do is not what we do. We work in the IT department, so we're really just supporting just a lot of people who are doing those right of way and utility related tasks and jobs. Um, but yeah, no, it's cool. Like, you can say whatever you like. I would just be super discreet about like social security number and personal address.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I'll try to be discreet.
Yeah, unless you feel extremely connected to all the internet out there and you want everyone to know, then say whatever
Yeah.
you want.
We're all good friends. We're all good friends.
But just to kind of speak on IT a little bit, because I went through a very similar situation. It's funny because with IT, you feel like IT is such a big world and a big environment that applying for IT positions, since there are so many out there, that applying for an IT position is going to be sort of an easy thing to, achieve. You feel like you're going to get a lot of callbacks, lots of interviews, and you're going to get plugged in relatively quickly because there are so many job listings. And that's really not the case, because IT is a super technical, skill based field, and all the jobs are extremely individualized in particular. So when a company's looking for an IT position, they're really looking for just the perfect candidate that aligns with their values, the requirements they have for the role, someone more specifically with experience. So in our case, it was challenging because, just like you, when I started, I didn't have very much experience. Therefore, my resume probably got tossed a lot. Um, but there are positions out there that are really more based on, like startup or entry type positions where the hiring manager or the supervisor wants somebody that can teach. And that's kind of what happened with us, I feel, is that our boss really wanted someone who's teachable so that they can mold and
Hmm.
shape us into the type of workers that they want. And I think that's kind of how we ended up in the same space.
Yeah, definitely. And like, I can't even express, like, still to this day, the gratitude I have for like finally being given a chance, and finally being able to prove that I can, carry the weight of this position just as well as, um, not any other IT professional, but the same as anybody else in this position.
I think you're doing super well. I think you can outperform me with help desk. I can do help desk, and I was fine at help desk, but just constantly being on the phone with people and like constantly not only technical problem solving but managing people's emotions is really exhausting. Like that part of it like really burns me out.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain points where like they're starting to freak out over something, and I just want to like cut them off and be like, "Stop! It's not that big of a deal. It's not that big of a deal. I promise you." But it typically doesn't go that way. I have to be very courteous and be like, come from an understanding
Mhm.
point of view.
So talk about security a little bit because this is something that's a little. I mean, I have a Security Plus certification, but I know very little about the that sphere when it comes to IT, that world of security. So, what is it that intrigued you to cybersecurity, and what are some of the features of that sphere that you like the most?
Um, I definitely say just the versatility of what's capable. Like there's IT, which has, a plethora of jobs, and cybersecurity is one of those. But if you delve deeper, there's hundreds more, titles that you can look for that are just security related. So I definitely just what drew me was, um, I gotta say like just how cool it looked. I mean, I was trying to come up with a smarter answer for a really long time, but it just looked cool. Like I'll be honest.
Mhm.
I had seen shows like Mr. Robot and stuff where they're hacking a bunch, and yeah, I mean that's what I wanted to look into. And after looking into it, you realize that most of the movies are fake, um, but there's still, some cool aspects of it. And what really interests me is just how automated it's all becoming. I think I mentioned it in the presentation we did earlier last month, but just just yeah, like the versatility and everything that comes with it. There's so much that's automated and versatile. Like there's hardly any typing on a keyboard a lot anymore, really. If you wanted to hack something, you can. It's a lot through a graphical interface, and it makes things simpler. But you still want to look into the back end of things. You want to. I find it interesting, like people that can script their own malicious like payloads
Mhm.
that can actually code that. It's insane. Like they essentially just know so many programming languages, and that was an interest that I had as well was programming, and I wanted to kind of implement the two. Uh, and then kind of after looking into it, I think I I kind of switched and was like, well, I think I just prefer the hacking side of things. And using those really versatile tools because they really can do a lot these days.
What do you think for people who are interested in security specifically? What are some of the tools that on the security side you could use in a general IT position, like a help desk, all the way up through like network to system admin?
Oh, like how security is applicable to an IT like support position?
Yeah, any kind of IT role. Like, what are some of the
Oh,
skills that you would use that you could plug in, like in any kind of IT role?
yeah. So, protocols, HTTP, FTP, SFTP, all that stuff. Um, those web protocols and the matching port numbers. That's something I had memorized prior. I obviously don't exactly remember them anymore, but I still know their protocols and their purpose.
Mhm.
So learning the protocols and like being able to look at things and understand what's going on. Because if you don't study them, you're just going to see those three letters and think, what does that mean? So, definitely gives you a better scope, like understanding protocols and whatnot. And that's something, you study thoroughly if you're working in a very security based role, security focused role, because, you're looking at not web transactions, but web traffic and all that. You're looking at that possibly all day. So those protocols are definitely applicable. Another thing is like uh, Honestly, just security policies in general.
Hmm.
So like security policies, let's say, for example, two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication, those are all security policies. Um, and then the way you have those forms of authentication. So let's say it's something that you know, a password, whereas, if you had a fingerprint, an iris scanner, anything like that, that's something you are. It's two different kind of fields of authentication. And studying those things prior, it's definitely cool to finally to come into a company and see how they're applied.
Hmm.
Uh, and even though I'm in a help desk role, it still kind of helped me better understand everything and why those policies were being implemented.
What do you think? So, if someone's going into IT, so the cool thing about IT is that IT just has a lot of different. You wear a lot of hats in some places, and
Mm,
then in the world of IT, there are so many different paths. So you have like network people, you have security people, you have programmers, you have technical support, you have system admin, you have your administrative support people, you have CIO. Like there's so many different things you can do and really kind of
mm.
grab hold of. So if somebody wants to take the path that you took, like the security path or cybersecurity, what is the end goal? What would the like ultimate position look like?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a pretty good question. Truthfully, mine doesn't constantly change, but it's different from what I said in the interview for the company I'm working for now. Like it's like originally I really wanted to do exploit development. Um that, it was just, and I don't mean to sound lazy. It was just it's too much. It's like you already have to keep up with a lot of changes in IT and security, especially. Exploit development, like constantly learning new techniques and constantly, um, you know, having to programming languages, like they come out with updates all the time. Programming
Hmm.
languages are constantly changing with new libraries. So learning all those new things, it like consistently day in, day out without a break, it was just like, okay, I don't want to really live my life that way. Um, I'd still really want to do, penetration testing. Working in a very security focused role is really what the end goal is, whether it be, you know, blue team, or defense. So like, reviewing security logs, reviewing web traffic, stuff like that. Whether it has to be that first prior to getting to penetration testing, it might have to be, or it definitely will have to be. But yeah, once that, my end goal really is just ethical hacking, penetration testing, and there's still a lot you have to keep up with. But I feel like exploit development is that just like that next step up. That's like kind of crazy.
That's interesting. I'm kind of I don't know if I'm better off or not as well off like than you because I'm sort of almost out of the IT kind of umbrella like with my role because
Yeah.
what I do is
Hmm.
geographic information systems or GIS is like designing online mapping tools. So I basically build maps and they are available on mobile devices, available in your desktop browser, and they really just provide like data in a visualized sort of state where you can observe data about parcels and trends and weather and everything else, environmental related stuff, all sort of on a computer screen or a tablet screen or a phone screen. And it's still under the IT umbrella for us, but it's almost out of it because it's not. I mean, it's very technical and it does involve a lot of languages and creativity and stuff like that. But going in, interviewing for help desk and ending up with GIS is just an example of how in the IT world you don't really know where you're going to land depending on sort of what choices you make. You can go a lot of different ways. And we had this discussion whenever I was doing performance appraisals and stuff last year. It was like, I really want to move up. I really want to progress and grow and develop. And my boss was like, well, this is the path. This is what's open. If you want to pursue GIS, then there's a path for you. And so that's sort of how I ended up in that lane. But IT kind of works that way in a sense that you may start in one place and have a direction, or your arrow might be pointing at something, and then you may end up totally in a different space.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like, especially like system administrator roles, people that aren't typically working on like the front end of support with those end users, but are more on the backside of things, like implementing, any new software, ordering licenses per se, dealing with anything administrative like that, where you're working with that third party company. I definitely think is also, a really cool position, just because, you can brainstorm with the other people that are, let's say, also in a position similar, and implement those security policies with them. Like, you have more of a say as an administrator. So I definitely think that position is also definitely very interesting.
Do you think you would enjoy doing any kind of supervisor type role where you're in charge of people?
I mean, maybe at some point. Yeah, maybe at some point. Not really anytime. Not like, obviously not anytime soon. But I mean, it would be cool to work with a team more closely, I guess, like a really close team that you're working together on like issue or multiple related issues, stuff like that, I think is cool. But in regards to a supervisor, no more than like a very small team, like not a lot of people.
You don't want to train a bunch of little security ethical hackers.
No, I do not.
What's the next big certification goal? Like what's in your path for development?
Yeah, so for development, the last certification or certificate that I received was through TryHackMe, which, for those that don't know, is just essentially a software that puts you in, or a website per se, that puts you in a controlled environment via virtual machines, and allows you to practice with their tools, their libraries, everything like that. So I recently got a junior penetration testing or junior penetration tester certificate from them. In regards to my next steps, I am studying for the Security Plus and hopes to get that the end of this year. Coming back to it from last year, like I touched on, it all seems so much simpler. Like, I can't stress how much simpler everything is now that I've had the experience. Like, I don't think I was being I don't think I was jumping the gun per se whenever I went for it that first time, but I can't stress how much it helps me understand things now that I've actually worked in IT for almost a year and have that kind of hands-on experience. I can relate, like, almost everything that it says in the book, I can relate to something that I do at work.
Mm-hmm.
So I just feel like it's way easier coming back this time now that I have this experience. But
yeah,
after
and for
that,
those, go for it. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. So after that, I just plan to probably pursue my kind of rank in TryHackMe, because they like to tell you, what your rank is with all the other users. So kind of hoping to take that up, maybe get another certificate in the meantime, and then possibly go for a penetration testing certification sometime in 2023.
Yeah, it sounds daunting. So from my own experience, for those listening / watching, CompTIA, which is sort of the host, he's talking about Security Plus. It's really a branch of the CompTIA vine. So it's CompTIA has a couple of certs that are extremely well known in the world of information technology. There's the A Plus, there's the Network Plus, there's the Security Plus, and then there's like Cloud Plus. There's a bunch of different ones, but CompTIA is sort of like the industry standard. So like if you're CompTIA certified, it just really boosts your resume quite a bit. It makes you a lot more marketable in the workforce and things like that. That being said, CompTIA exams are very difficult. So
Mhm.
the first one that I took was Network Plus. I totally jumped over the A plus, which thankfully I didn't have to take that because I didn't want to. With it being two parts, like I don't want to build a computer. I don't
Yeah.
want to do all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So I jumped over A plus and just went right for the Network Plus. Failed it the first time, had to take it again. Because they're tough. CompTIA, well, they're all situational questions, and we're of course not going to compromise the integrity of CompTIA by telling you question examples, but they're all situation based, and a lot of IT certs are like that, where if you don't interact with those situations in your day to day work, you're going to do poorly on the test. And so
Yeah.
that was part of my problem with Network Plus was I assumed that studying was going to give me enough information to just succeed at the test. Whereas I really had to get into some routers and get into some like switches and mess with controls and stuff to really understand a lot of the topics. Um, and then oddly enough, when I did Security Plus, it felt way easier just because a lot of the Network Plus stuff applies with Security Plus. So it was almost like a partial review with just some of the protocols and stuff thrown in. We're going to do an episode one day where we just go over protocols because that would be something people would love to listen to. I was trying to remember a couple while you were talking. I remember FTP, I think, is 23. I think Secure Shell is 22.
Yeah. Yep.
One of the HTTP is either HTTP or HTTPS. One of them is 43. I'm not sure which one.
HTTP is 43, and then HTTPS is 80, I think. I hope I'm right.
Something like
I
that. It's
really,
either
I
180
really
or
hope.
80.
Yeah, I really hope I'm right.
But yeah, it's all there's no like definition based questions. It's all situational. So you
Mm.
really have to understand what you're doing if you want to succeed at CompTIA. Whereas the Microsoft stuff, and again, not to compromise the integrity of Microsoft, but they're really more definition based. So like if you do a Microsoft cert that's based on security, they're going to ask you a lot of questions about like the definition of this or, how is this applicable? Whereas CompTIA is just going to throw you in and say, if you're a security analyst, what do you do? Kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so that's my experience. And then GIS with Esri certs, they've been similar. They've been situational. So it really does force you to interact with your software quite a bit.
Yeah. The Microsoft certifications, I haven't even, looked much into them. I know they discussed them during the program I was in. And yeah, but I never even really looked into them because there's so many like companies that offer these kind of courses and certifications. Like I mean, I obviously don't look into it much, so I can't give you names, but there's like a very long list,
Mm-hmm.
of websites and companies that offer this knowledge to you.
Yeah, and then there's even stuff like Google. Like Google has their own IT related stuff you can
Oh
do,
yeah.
and then like Apple. Apple has their own like tech support kind of certs that go through some of that security and hardware based stuff. It's really bizarre how many there are, and it's hard to know, which one's the best one to take. But that's why I said, CompTIA is widely recognized as like an industry standard because even though it's a very generic and vague kind of certification, it really covers a lot. So, if you have Network Plus on your resume, companies are like, oh, well, he knows a little bit about routing and
Yeah.
that kind of thing, and IP address and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, networking was definitely the one thing I lacked coming out of that 6 month course is because I feel like they touched on all these important security policies. They put us in environments. They gave us projects. They let us even work in some digital forensics at the end. We got to create use like Docker container. I'm not sure if you've heard of that, but we got to
Mm-hmm.
like configure things through Azure, like configure load balancers and stuff like that in these controlled environments. That was just crazy
Hmm.
to to kind of experience for the first time.
Nice. I mean, there were
Yeah.
a couple of things that Chris and I discussed. Our boss's name is Chris. I won't give away his last name. A couple of things that we discussed regarding training for the CompTIA certs, where there's like a $1,500 course and it's an all day with an instructor thing where they put you in an environment and they give you all these different tasks to complete. And I do think that they would be really valuable because, you know, you need that experience to succeed on questions and situations. But I also think that given the right environment with your job, a lot of times you can also do that. Like, for example, with our company, one of the things that I help with is setting up new office locations. So on occasion, I'll assist with that. And one of the steps that we have is to configure the router for the new location. So our coworker will send the router to my house. I'll configure it. Then I'll put it in the mail for the new office location. So it really gives me some hands-on experience with networking stuff like protocols and IP addressing and that kind of thing. And we do have some things in place like web filters and antivirus. And really all of us interact with that stuff a little bit. So if we need to work on a computer, we can go in and you know, mess with the filter and things like that. So it's cool because in an environment like we have, a smaller company, we get to do a lot of different things, which really prepares us to kind of branch out on those different paths.
Yeah, I mean, I remember starting out, I was just essentially doing installations, computer setups, like repetitive, not necessarily simple tasks. I mean, you can run into an issue, but it's relatively straightforward work. Whereas, now I can handle issues that involve networking, involve troubleshooting, whether a switch is viable, like whether something's gone bad in a switch, and narrowing down an issue on a much larger scope than just application level issues. So yeah.
So anything else on IT that you want to hit on? I was ready to transition into gaming.
That sounds good for me. That sounds good for me.
Awesome. So what's your earliest memory? Like, what was your first game? Do you remember?
Um, oh gosh, I'm trying to think back.
Or maybe first gaming system at least.
Oh yeah, first gaming system. It was one of the Game Boys. I'm not sure which one. I remember playing Spyro, the purple dragon. I remember playing
Mhm.
that game. That's probably one of the earliest ones. Another important one was like the Batman series, like
Okay.
growing up. Yeah, like Batman Arkham Asylum and Arkham City are very memorable in regards to just what I played as a kid.
Hmm. Yeah, I had a Super Nintendo, had an N64, had a GameCube, really Nintendo family all the way through. And then
Yeah.
at some point I got a PS2 because I was like, there are thousands of games and it's so cheap and there's so many
hmm
options. Which
Yeah.
unfortunately I got a PS2 like at the end of life of PS2. It was right when PS3 was sort of coming out. But it really didn't matter because PS2 had so many games that, you know, I had so much to choose from.
Y-
Um,
Yeah, I mean, the PlayStation 2, I remember like playing WWE 2006 on the PlayStation 2, and I had the little memory card, and you had to put the memory card in it and everything. I remember the PlayStation 2, but I remember my first big console was definitely the PS3.
okay.
And I was like freaking out when I got that. I was totally nerding.
See, by the time that it was time to get a, like I forgot what gen console it was, but
hmm
I got a 360. So by that point I had transitioned out of the Sony family. So I was in Xbox 360 and then got an Xbox One, and I've just been there ever since. I don't game as much anymore, but like games that I could play like on 3DS or Nintendo DS and just mobile games were just better, I think, for me. Just because I don't have that much time to be stationary for a long period of time. So I ended up going back to the Nintendo family, but definitely got into Xbox for a while. And the only thing that I regret is PS3 had The Last of Us, and I never had The Last of Us, so I feel bad because it was such a great game.
Yeah, yeah, that game really is crazy. Did you see what they did with so, they came out with the PS3 edition, actually. They came out with the PS3 edition. They then remastered it for the PS4.
Okay.
And now on the PS5, rather than, make a port for that remaster, a PS5 port for that remaster, they released a variation of the game called Last of Us Part 1
Hmm.
because there's two parts now. So they
Right.
renamed it and then charged you retail for the PS5 edition. So it's kind of like, I'm not going to get that. Maybe it's on a good sale, but I'm not going to pay $70 for this game I played like a decade ago.
Yeah, it's really frustrating, and you might feel the same way. The way that movies and video games are the two like media where everything's a remake. Like everything has been recycled. There's like almost no original stuff anymore. And it happened with Final Fantasy VII, sort of somewhat recently with PlayStation, and I saw like, oh, cool, Final Fantasy VII got a remake or whatever, and then they obviously ported it into HD as well, so you could play the original version or you could play the remake, which you have to buy. But it's just everything's being recycled and remade. It's like Breath of the Wild Part Two. We're not going to give you a new title. We're just going to give you more of the first one. Um, I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
kind of strange for me that everything's kind of just swinging back around.
I mean, there's certain games that I never experienced the first time. So actually, right now, I'm playing through Resident Evil 2, the remake, and I'm not sure when that came out initially, but I think I was definitely too young to play it at the time. So now, like going back and playing the remake of it, it looks like great on PS5. So I've actually had a pretty good time with that. But of course, I haven't consumed it before. So
Right. Yeah, Resident Evil, they started sort of remaking and revamping those. And I mean, there are Nintendo does a pretty good job of original stuff. It's just the way the Nintendo works is different because they have all of their franchises, they have all of their characters that are sort of established. So they just put them in new situations and new stories. So like you get your 3D Mario platformer, but it's still Mario rescuing Peach from Bowser. It's just a different world he's in.
yeah.
Or like Kirby, he still is a pink guy who absorbs things. He's just in a different world. Whereas I think with like third party stuff and Sony and Xbox, there aren't that many established characters maybe that kind of keep popping up. Like the only one that really comes to mind is Solid Snake, and he's like kind of retired. I don't know. Maybe they'll see him again, but
Yeah, that's actually very true now that you like discussed that. Now I'm thinking about it more. That's very true that Nintendo kind of keeps that. Mario's been around since like God knows how long, and they still got him going around. And PlayStation, Sony, like they have nothing that's on that scale. Like you said, they have Solid Snake. There may be Metal Gear Solid 6, who knows? But uh, I mean, Kratos is Kratos is kind of there for the God of War series. I mean, that's a PlayStation exclusive, but in terms of a game that isn't a continuation of what was previously produced, yeah. Like that's just PlayStation. Like PlayStation is going to continue the same story, whereas Nintendo is going to take those characters and implement it, put them in Smash Bros, put them in Mario Kart, which is entirely different from what Mario initially was.
yeah, and you do have some repeatability. So like Call of Duty, I guess there are characters in like the single player experience that maybe crossed over into multiple games, but it's
Mhm.
different because I don't really care about the characters in Call of Duty. I'm just gonna like find a cool gun and like shoot things or shoot
Yeah,
zombies or whatever. Or same thing with Halo. I don't really care about Master Chief that much. I mean, I'm just gonna put on a suit of armor and shoot things. So it's like with
yeah,
Nintendo, it's more like narrative focused and story driven and character driven. So they want you to care about Samus. They want you to care about Fox and Mario and Peach. So they just keep building their stories out. Even if they're recycled stories, they build their stories.
yeah.
And like you said, I guess there is some merit to remakes because, I mean, we've had Skyrim ported like 15 times, but people still love Skyrim. So
Yeah, like you can only buy like the anniversary edition now or something. You can't buy the initial base game that come out or base like kind of a title that came out, I guess. You can't
mm,
purchase that. You can only buy the anniversary edition. And I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they made a PS5 port for Skyrim. They may have already have. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at this point because there's so many like it's on everything. But I mean, Elder Scrolls 6 is still a good ways away.
Mm.
So who knows if they'll actually port it over to PS5 or just leave it as is.
I wonder why Skyrim and not Oblivion. I wonder why that game in particular.
I never even consumed any of the other Elder Scrolls. I think like most players, most people just came in at Skyrim.
Hmm.
Um, and even then I didn't play the game for long. I never finished it or anything because to my knowledge it's a very lengthy game. But I know I never actually went through with it with finishing the title.
What if can you give like a top 5 favorite games, like all time list?
Yeah. Okay, so I won't do any specific order, otherwise I'd be here for a second. So just top 5. Um, Definitely God of War's up there. The 2018 launch on PS4, that was like insane and like very like it's the first game that I probably like felt. I didn't feel emotion for it, but it made me feel emotional, I guess, because like uh just because of like the storytelling and the story that was told in that game in particular.
Hmm.
Some of the other ones, dude, I play so many video games, and then when I ask what's my favorite, I'm just like I don't know. um, Really memorable is probably Pokemon Diamond and Pearl.
Okay.
That's very memorable for me. So just Gen 4 Pokemon.
Hmm.
Zelda Ocarina of Time was very memorable. Went through a
Hmm.
lot of struggles on the 3DS, like a lot. Like had to look up so many guides. And then hopping back over to like the PlayStation or just Elden Ring. Elden Ring's up there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I forgot about that one. That one I sunk a lot of hours into earlier this year. Earlier this year, it was probably like an unhealthy amount, but um, Elden Ring definitely. Uh, and in terms of the other Souls titles, I've never actually beaten any of them. I've played through them; they're really good, but I
Mm.
can't say they're my favorite unless I've like. I can't say they're my favorite if I've actually beaten it. Like if I
Yeah.
haven't beaten it, I can't say it's my favorite game. Um, I remember having a lot of good time with Spider-Man, like the PS4 Spider-Man, because I remember playing the much worse, well, not much worse, but the different variations that came out prior, the different Spider-Man titles that came out on the 360, PlayStation 2, stuff like that.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I definitely felt a lot of nostalgia whenever I played through that game. And yeah, like had a blast start to finish and just like didn't let up until it was 100% beaten.
And see, that's
What
that's
about
the
you though?
thing, because I remember Spider-Man on PS2. I might have been Spider-Man 2 on PS2, and I remember how
Hmm.
cool it was to just explore the city and swing around
Yeah.
mindlessly. So, like, if I picked up a modern Spider-Man game, I would just do that. I wouldn't play the story mode. I would just swing everywhere. Um,
Yeah, the swinging mechanics in that one were outstanding and like the way they implemented it in combat. But what about you? Like what's your top 5 favorite?
Top 5 favorite video games for me. So mine is going to lean heavily on nostalgia because I'm
Hmm.
not a huge gamer, so I'm not extremely good at games, but there are
Hmm.
games that I just love because they are the game they are. Um,
Yeah.
Not in any order like you, because I feel like my order would vary quite a bit day to day. Um,
Exactly.
and like year to year, as I get older, maybe the game would fall in ranking or something.
Hmm.
So games that I've played and games I've beaten only, because I would have to throw titles in that I haven't beaten if they were an option. So
Yeah.
Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, kind of like you and Platinum, just Gen 4 Pokemon would definitely be in the top 5 because I put more hours into those games than any other video game.
Yeah.
Like 300, 400 hours in Pokemon Diamond.
Dang.
Um, I would say the Kingdom Hearts, specifically Kingdom Hearts 358 Days Over 2, which is kind of a hot take. A lot of people don't appreciate that game very much, but for me, I really loved that one, as well as Kingdom Hearts 2, but specifically 358 Days Over 2 would be in there. Call of Duty, the first Modern Warfare, like the OG one, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, that one was just extremely awesome to experience, especially considering how different it was in its time. The first person and the multiplayer experience was exceptional. So that would have to be in there. Trying to think Nintendo stuff. I would almost wager to say Guitar Hero, just because I put a lot of time in Guitar Hero and I really loved all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it would be in the top 5, even though that feels like a really bad answer. And then probably tie it up with like Twilight Princess. I mean, Ocarina of Time, don't get me wrong, definitely a more important game. But for me, Twilight Princess is the better game.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of Zelda games, I really, unfortunately, haven't played much. It was just Ocarina of Time. I attempted to play Majora's Mask and was like, okay, I'm good. It was hard, man. It was difficult for me. And yeah, and then probably just Breath of the Wild. What was that? They came out with one of the 3DS remakes. I think it was Link Between Worlds. I played through that one. That one's really good.
Mm-hmm.
I like that one. I'm not sure if there's overall negative reviews, but I didn't mind that one.
Yeah.
But touching on Modern Warfare, I didn't play. I was more like Battlefield. I played Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4 a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, shooters. I mean, I've never been a big shooter person. I don't care that much for FPS, but the story and the single player experience of that particular one was just such a groundbreaking achievement, in my opinion, and just for gaming as a shooter too. Like the story as a shooter was just remarkable. And yeah, I've played through Majora's Mask, and I don't intend to play through it ever again. Like, just why give me that much stress in a Nintendo title? Twilight Princess, I love very much to the core. Ocarina of Time, like I said, very important game. That and Super Mario 64, very, very important games. Breath of the Wild, definitely a worthwhile offering for the Switch. I'm not as in love with it as a lot of people are. A lot of people put it like top 1-2 Zelda games. Skyward Sword was a bit of a letdown, as most people agree.
I haven't even played through it. I saw some of the gameplay for the Switch remake, but I was like, I don't know. The gameplay just looked a little different than what I was used to.
It's okay. It's fine. They really just wanted, because at the time when it came out, there was a feature with the Wii called the Wii Motion Plus, and they really just wanted to create games that use that functionality. So they're like, what better thing to do than throw Link in a game where you could swing his sword with him, you know?
Yeah.
And so it was just kind of thrown together. But there are some really cool, like the cell shaded games like Wind Waker are very much loved by the fan base too. But yeah, the ones you mentioned, like some of the handhelds, like Link Between Worlds, are also really, really popular.
Yeah, I never really played through Wind Waker. I'm trying to think. I sunk a lot of hours into Mario Kart 8 when it came out, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, because I had never bought the Wii U. I had the Wii, but never got the Wii U. But once I got my hands on Mario Kart 8 and Zelda, because that's essentially what the Nintendo Switch ran when it first came out, was Mario Kart 8 and Zelda, and that's it. And I sunk a lot of hours and got like 3 stars. I like 100%ed essentially everything.
Wow.
I got 3 stars like on 200cc. Yeah.
Yeah, Mario Kart's a special game. It's like, I believe genuinely that the current one, like Mario Kart 8, is just going to be here forever. Like, it's never going away. There's never going to be like next Nintendo console, they'll just remake Mario Kart 8 and add a couple of maps.
And I believe that's what they're doing now, because they have a DLC that they're like slowly rolling out with more cups. But yeah.
Any last words? Anything that you feel that you should address or want to address?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to thank you, of course, for having me on. This isn't like an opportunity I get regularly, and to come on a podcast and just talk about essentially whatever I want, is pretty nice, just to have like continuous conversation from topic to topic. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing really more I have to say. I don't have much social media to plug.
Yeah,
So,
I was gonna say thank you for your time. It was a really fun conversation. We'll figure out what we're doing with the episode later on. I was talking about earlier, maybe splitting it up so
mhm.
people could kind of see the tier list on their own if they like Pokemon, and then listen to your story separately. So I might do something like that.
Okay.
But I do thank you for your time. Conversation was really good. It flowed, had a lot of fun. So yeah, if you have anything to plug, do it now or forever hold your peace.
I am all good. Thank you.
All right, sounds good.